You're listening to the Weekly Dartscast 180.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. We're back. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me as always the darts statistician, but no longer the darts driver king. That accolade going to none other than PDC tour card holder Ryan Meikle. We'll see if he can get it back this week. Burton DeWitt, apart from that news, how are you doing?
Oh, I missed that I had lost the crown. I did have one run that didn't save, so maybe that was the difference.
Yeah.
Because I went for a run on Thursday, and for some reason the Strava app didn't save it. So I was short a few miles from what I should have had. But no excuses. You can't afford any mistakes, and that was a mistake for me not to make sure it's saved. So congrats to Ryan. A well-earned title, and now it's my turn to come back and take it back not next week, this week. I went for a run this morning, did a sprint run, so we'll see. It's a good start. How are you, Alex?
Well, for a second there, I thought you were going to call up Strava VAR to get that Thursday run reinstated, but yeah, I'm doing well here, thank you. We're fresh off another major event, the Grand Slam of Darts. We've got another one just around the corner, the Players' Championship finals this weekend. Lots to discuss as always, so let's get straight into it with our look back at this year's Grand Slam. Luke Littler winning the title on debut. He's up to number 5 in the world, and as you're going to hear from Jack, one of our sponsors at Kwiff, he's also now the 2-1 favourite to win the World Championship. So is the Nuke now the player to beat in World Darts?
Well, Luke Boy did beat Luke Mann in a very one-sided final, 16 legs to 3. And that was far from the most impressive that he was all week, which is saying something because boy, was he impressive in that final. Averaging well over 105 in that match and averaging over a ton throughout the tournament. But what was, I think, the most impressive were the two matches where he was pushed. Mike DeDecker always in front in that match, and Littler had to come from behind, come from well behind in that one, winning 6 of the last 8 legs to turn that one around and get over the line against the World Grand Prix champion Mike DeDecker with some of the best darts he had thrown all week. Yes, he survived a match start, a dart at Bull from DeDecker, but that was the only dart for the match that he afforded DeDecker. And DeDecker didn't really have many chances in any of those other legs when Littler had that spurt to turn that match around. And the semifinal as well, coming from 12-8 down against Gary Anderson. Gary Anderson hitting everything in that match, it seemed like 4-ton plus checkouts, but it was not enough. And you knew in the moment it might not be enough because you knew that Littler had gears that he could reach if he needed to, and he did need to. And then getting the break of throw, and then holding in the decider to win 16-15. And we'll come on to it later. It's one of the matches of the year, if not the match of the year. I think those were the matches that were the most impressive, even more than 32 legs to 5 that he beat Watamina and Lukeman against combined. And I don't know if I'm yet ready to say that he's the favorite because Luke Humphries is the world number 1 and is the defending world championship. And it wasn't the week of Humphries' life, obviously, for many reasons. Going out in the group stage, only winning one match, and that match coming after he was already eliminated, going against a player who had already advanced. So, okay, Mansell still had the group title to play for, but that was all he had to play for. Mansell there was no pressure on him, and that was the only one that Humphries was able to get. But it was a bad week. And overall, it's not been a bad year for Luke Humphries. It hasn't been as great as it was last year, but he still added the World Matchplay, the second biggest major, to his CV. He's made 3 other major finals this year. He's added on a pair of titles on the European Tour to go with the 5 he had won over the previous 2 years, 3 finals overall. It's been a very good year, if not great year, for Luke Humphries, and it's all been about getting ready to defend the World Championship. Of the players in the past few years who won their first world title, he's the one who has taken the most quickly to that pressure. Peter Wright struggled a bit after becoming world champion. Obviously, Michael Smith struggled a lot after becoming world champion. There's not been nearly as many struggles from Luke Humphries, and I think it's been all about getting ready for the World Championships. But even if he's playing at his best, Luke Littler, it might even be better. I'm staying with what I've said all along. I would nudge it to Luke Humphries if I had to choose, but there's two players that it's not much to separate. And there wasn't much to separate on the 3rd of January last year. If assuming they play each other in the final, there might not be much to separate them this time. But I'm not saying that Luke Littler should be the favorite. I'm sticking with what I said. They're both the favorites. They're co-favorites. And being that he's the world number 1 and world champion, I'll just inch it by the slightest of margins to Luke Humphries if I have to pick. And that's the point of this show. I have to pick.
Looking at Luke Littler, I think he is undoubtedly the star attraction in world darts right now. It seems funny to say that because of all the interest that he's had in the last 12 months. There's few dart players that can match the interest that he's had from the media, the general public in 2024. But coming into the Grand Slam, it's probably the quietest that hype has been all year. A lot of the talk has been about the surprise winners of majors in recent weeks. We had Mike Decker, Rich Edhouse winning these major titles, and they took a lot of the headlines from Luke Littler. And that's certainly changed, hasn't it, after the weekend, hasn't it? Because all eyes are firmly back on this young man, not just in the darts world, but beyond. You've got the mainstream media. We've already seen him doing interviews with TalkSport and Sky Sports News, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty more media requests coming his way for the rest of this week as well. But the way Luke Littler's performed in the Grand Slam right from the start, the 3 group games, 110 average in the first game against Keane Barry, blew him away 5-0 in 6 minutes, and then backing it up with 2 more wins, 2 more 100+ averages. And as you mentioned, he did have a few big scares along the way to winning this title. It wasn't all plain sailing, and it is worth mentioning that because the lasting image of this title win of this tournament is going to be that one-sided final against Martin Lukeman, where he won 15 legs in a row and beat him 16-3 with that 107 average. But before then, to get to the final, those games you touched on with Mike Decker and Gary Anderson both pushed all the way in a last leg decider. And in Decker's case, he had that match start at the ball for the 170 to get over the line. And Gary Anderson's game as well, we'll touch on it more later, that was special. But 16-15 and 13-9 down in that game to come back and win it. What a comeback. But yeah, this tournament, Luke Littler, he's shown he can dominate games like Phil Taylor and Michael Van Gerwen did, but he's also come through some real tight ones as well when he hasn't had things all his own way. And he is still 17 years old, but I think this title, it felt very much like a coming of age moment over those 9 days. He has shown a lot of different attributes of what makes him such an incredible talent. So going back to the question, is Luke Littler the player to beat? He's one of 2 players to beat right now. I know the Grand Slam didn't go according to plan for Luke Humphries going out in the group stages, but he has built an awful lot of credit in the bank these last 12 months. So for me, the 2 Lukes, they are the players to beat. And yeah, it's very, very tough to split them at the moment. You might be siding towards Littler right now because of the Grand Slam, but we might just come into this podcast next week with Humphries winning another major and we'll be swaying towards him again.
Yeah, we'll see if Luke Humphries wins the title this upcoming weekend. We'll come on to talking about the Players' Championship Finals in a little bit, but I'm sure we'll see this question on here again in the opposite direction, as you alluded to there. Now, almost a 3rd surprise major winner in a row, as Martin Lukeman, after a dream week for him, felt, I wouldn't say just short in the final, but he did fall short against a rampant Nuke. But first major final for Smash after actually a first major semi even right before that. What do you think's next for Martin Lukeman?
Yeah, what a run it was for Martin Lukeman. And I didn't post too much about it on social media, but I was fortunate to receive a ticket to the final day in Wolverhampton on Sunday, thanks to one of Martin's sponsors, Mission. Shout out to Daryl Fitton and Gary Taylor for looking after me. And for the semi-finals, we were sat next to some of Martin's friends from the estate that he grew up in, and they were loving the experience, being there to watch him win that semi-final against Mickey Mansell and get through to a major final. And yeah, the run ended very abruptly. When you look at the total playing time in that final, less than 35 minutes, Luke Littler tore him apart 16-3, and those 15 legs in a row from 2-0 down to go 15-2 up. But being in the arena, one of the biggest cheers of the final was when Martin Lukeman won that 3rd leg and ended that 15-leg winning run from Littler. It was a lovely moment for him to get that reaction from the crowd, because for the most part, once Luke Littler pulled away in those first 10 legs, it was a very quiet atmosphere for a major final, and it almost felt like a procession of sorts. We were just waiting for Luke to get to that magic number of 16 legs to be crowned the champion. But for Martin, yeah, this run, take away the final where he was outplayed, he's got to look back on the other 6 matches, beating Rob Cross twice, 3-0 down in the groups and coming back to beat him. And the quarter final on Friday night against him, that is the one that really stood out for me. To beat a player of Rob Cross's calibre over that long format, first to 16 legs, it's a huge feather in the cap for him. And it's a big tick in the box to say that he can produce a high level and sustain it over a long period of time. And I think that's one of the things that has got to bode well for him going forward, that if he can get back into those positions again, he can do it. And that's the thing. We don't know whether Martin Lukeman will get to another major final again. We've seen he's got the game. We saw that last week. But the depth in the PDC nowadays, it's only going to get stronger. So there's no guarantees anymore that once you make your first major final, the second, the third and the fourth are going to follow. But I think one of Martin Lukeman's biggest strengths is that determination and battling through difficult moments. You look back to 2021 when he won back his tour card. He won less than 10 grand all season. The next year, he's playing at the World Matchplay, reaching the quarterfinals of the World Grand Prix. And we've seen it before, maybe when we've dismissed him from making those further strides in the game, he's proven people wrong. And for him, I'd like to see him kick on now, get back in that top 32 and maybe win that first senior title on the Pro Tour next year.
I think that what you ended with is the important thing about what he needs to kick on and do. Obviously, making a run to a major final is life-changing for anyone who's up and coming in the world of darts, not just in terms of the prize money, £70,000, which is basically 2 years of security or close to 2 years of security on the tour. We're getting to the point where you're going to need £100,000 on your ranking to stay on tour. But if you get 70,000 in one tournament, you're probably going to do enough over the rest to be safe. So, it takes, not that there was pressure per se, being that he's qualified for the World Championships for the fourth year running, but there was, or is it the third year running, but it takes so much pressure off when you have that on your locker and you know that you're going to be in the Grand Slam again next year off of that. But the big next step is making sure he's getting to all the other majors. 2 years ago in his breakthrough year, he qualified for pretty much everything. He qualified for the World Matchplay. He qualified for the World Grand Prix, had a deep run there, qualified for the European Championships off of a year where he qualified for 9 of the 13 and made his first PDC final. Since that, though, he hasn't qualified in the last 2 years for any of those 3 events. The only thing he had qualified for was the World Championships and the Players' Championship Finals. Obviously, everyone gets to the UK Open as a tour card holder, so you don't qualify for that. He hasn't qualified for anything else until this year when he won through the qualifiers. That said, he's been getting back, moving in the direction of where he was on that breakthrough year 2 years ago. He's 41st in averages in Players' Championship events this year. That's not world breaking, but it's pretty darn good. If you think 32 players are getting to those prestigious majors, the Europeans, the World Matchplay, the World Grand Prix, 41st means you're right in that race to try to steal one of those spots if your performance levels are turning into prize money. He's also 8th in the averages in the Euro Tour qualifiers this year. This year, compared to last year, there's of course fewer players because there's now 32 players who are qualifying automatically as opposed to 16, as you take both the top 16 in the overall order of merit and the next 16 best in the Pro Tour order of merit getting in by right. So you're taking out most of the best players from those qualifiers. But even still, he's 8th in those averages, and he won through 6 of them, playing more matches than anyone else across the 13 qualifiers. He played 33 matches. Cameron Menzies only played 32. He's played and succeeded in those qualifiers, and played some of his better darts, averaging a half point more in those than he did in the Players' Championship events. That's the key, making sure that he continues to lift his game. Adding just a point to his average on average would be a very big difference between where he is right now and where he wants to get. And it will get him into those televised events. right now he's in the last spot for the World Matchplay. There's still a lot of season to go. Next season, I should say. There's a lot of next season to go before that cutoff. And taking those forms from those European Tour qualifiers and duplicating them next year will make sure that he stays in that race to get back to Blackpool, and it'll put him in good stead as the year goes on to get to the European Championships and to get back into the World Grand Prix as well. Winning a title will help as well. This past week has shown both the world and probably himself that he can win titles. He can go deep in tournaments. If you can do it on the big stage over best of 31 legs, you can do it in a pro tour and over best of 11. And that's the next step, is to keep on trucking, keep on climbing the rankings, and keep on improving, because that's how you're going to get back and put yourself in the position to duplicate that again.
On a side note as well, good to hear some bad manners for a major semi-final and a major final walk-on as well. But we've talked about Martin Lukeman, his first major final. Let's hear from a player who knows all about major finals. He's been in 6 of them. He's won 2 of them. Here's our chat with the 2-time major champion, Nathan Aspinall. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the 2-time major champion, Nathan Aspinall. Thanks for the time again, Nathan. How are you doing?
Yeah, not a problem, pal. Yeah, no, I'm good. The year coming up now. Enjoyed a couple of weeks off, but looking forward to mine at the weekend.
Yeah, we're talking just a few days before you're going to be heading off to Minehead for the Players' Championship finals, the last stop on the road to Ali Pali. I'm guessing you're itching to get back on that stage after missing out on the Grand Slam.
Yeah, I was obviously gutted. I love the Grand Slam. It probably, after the match play, probably my favourite tournament to play in. So, yeah, it was a bad qualification, and I didn't make it, unfortunately, but I've used it to my advantage. I've had some quality time off with the family, been away for a few days, and been hard on the practice board, and hopefully I can use the rest to my advantage and have a good one this weekend.
Definitely. Well, Luke Littler, a young man you know very well, went on to win the Grand Slam at the weekend. You said you were away. Did you manage to watch any of the tournament, or are you like some of the other players who prefer not to watch?
I watched the last 2 legs of the Gary-Luke game in the semi-final, and I turned the final on at night, and it was something like 7-2, and I just turned off and put the box set back on, so I knew it was only one outcome, but now fair play to him. It's like I say, I'm mates with Luke, and this year he's been fantastic. The numbers he's been putting in is obscene, and believe it or not, it's his first actual proper ranked TV major. So fair play to him. He was phenomenal all tournament based on the averages that I've seen. So probably the worthy winner, and hopefully that's his last one this year. It's getting a bit boring now, isn't it?
Well, let's get back to you, and it is the Players' Championship finals next for you. You come in as the 64th and final qualifier. You're facing another player that you know well, Chris Dobie. The draw's based on those Players' Championship rankings, so we've known the draw for a few weeks now. Have you guys been in contact, any pre-game nibbles at each other?
It started the evening of the qualification, to be fair. Obviously, everyone knows I'm not a massive fan of the Players' Championship events, and I played more this year than I played in the last few years, but still been competing and in as many as I really should do. So yeah, I think I'm quite fortunate to qualify. I owed my mate Johnny a drink or two for beating Nick Kenny in that final last leg. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been sat here talking to you now. I wouldn't have been there. So happy to get there, lucky to get there. But don't matter whether you're number 1 or number 64. I'm in the tournament now, and I believe I can go on and win it. Like I say, I've got a tough first game. Probably don't get much tougher for me than playing Dobie's. He's arguably my best mate on the tour. And we spend a lot of time together. We do normally room with each other in Miami, but for obvious reasons we've got separate rooms this time. But yeah, it's on the Thursday night we all went out for a meal for Stevie B's leaving do, and the banter started probably about 2 hours after the draw was confirmed, and it continued ever since. So yeah, there's a lot of bragging rights to be playing for. I think we don't care about the tournament, we just want to beat each other. So it'll be played in good spirit, and I'm sure it'll be a fantastic game.
Yeah, we're looking forward to watching it. And just lastly on the weekend, before we look back, Minehead, the place where you won your first major at the UK Open, but your record in this event. It's the only major you've not made at least the semi-finals in. Your best run has been the second round. I'm guessing it's time to change that this weekend.
That's why I don't play in the Pro Tours. I hate this tournament. I don't know what it is. I think every player has that one tournament. I think most of the time it's a Grand Prix that people don't like, but for some reason I don't know what it is. I just really struggle in this event. I don't know if it's because I'm more focused on the World Championships. That could be it. I don't know, but like I say, I didn't know it was a semi-final. Is it the semi-final that I've been to more?
Yeah, you've been to the semi-finals or better in all the other ranking majors apart from this one.
It was the quarterfinals a couple of years back, so I've obviously changed that somewhere without realising. But that's a fantastic start for myself. To be fair, I didn't know that. So hopefully we had this one, the final one to the list this weekend, and who knows. But I don't know what it is. It's a weird one for me. I think because I don't enjoy the Players Championship events throughout the year. I just do not enjoy them at all. Even though this is the finals and it is a TV event, maybe in the back of my mind, I know it's to do with the Players Championship event. If that makes sense, I don't know. But best assured, because I missed out in the Grand Slam last week, I will be giving it 110%, and let's change that bad record and hopefully turn it into a positive this week.
Well, let's get on to some other events where you've had plenty of success in. We last had you on the show just after your World Grand Prix final towards the end of 2022. A month later, you were in another final at the Grand Slam. You said to us you wanted to make it impossible for the PDC to leave you out of the Premier League. So were you confident those two finals would get you back in last year?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's shown. I think just prior to that, I think maybe I had a little bit of time off of my wrist, if I remember correctly. But to make two finals in the space of 6 weeks was fantastic. At that time, it's not been so good for me this last month. It's been horrendous because all my money's come off. But at that time, it was great, and I'd nearly beat Van Gogh in the final of the Grand Prix. I came back really well. I think I was 4-0 down in sets, and I pulled it back well. But and then obviously Smithy beat me in the Grand Slam. I was just absolutely shattered that day. But it got me back in the Premier League, and everyone knows how much I love the Premier League. That was what I was born to do, was to walk on big stages like that, and soak up all the atmosphere and entertain 10,000 people every Thursday night. And I was absolutely buzzing to get the call that was included back in the Premier League, and it was another successful campaign. Just missing out on the playoffs.
Yeah, in our last chat you said you wanted to experience the full wrath of the Premier League. Your previous two had been during the pandemic, so what was it like last year getting to experience those 16 weeks, 16 venues across Europe and play in front of all those big crowds?
Yeah, it was unbelievable. One of my dreams was always to walk out at the Manchester Arena, which obviously I did a couple of years ago. I got beat. I played Smithy, I think, if I remember correctly. I got beat and I didn't play well. I was an absolute bag of nerves. But the walk-on was so special. I had all my mates there, all my family. And I had a solid campaign. Like I said, I think I just missed out on, I think it was leg difference in the end against Johnny, if I remember correctly. But again, like I say, to finish fifth in the Premier League with all the travel in that, against the calibre of players that was in it that year, I put it down. It was quite a successful season, and I think all them games kick-started my season off, and obviously we know what happened after that, the matchplay game.
Yeah, we'll come on to that in a second. You got to do it all again though this year in the Premier League, and you've had 2 visits to at least all of the venues during the regular season. I'm guessing the answer to this question might be Manchester, but do you have a favourite venue and a favourite city out of all of them?
See, it's hard to say, not to say Rotterdam, considering I played there twice and won twice. And believe it or not, I'm not a big fan of playing in Holland. For some reason, I really struggle. Playing European tours or World Series events in Holland. I do struggle out there, generally speaking. But Rotterdam has been really good to me. But now, obviously, I've got to say Manchester. The homecoming, the atmosphere, even more so this year because I won the first game. I played Rob Cross. I played really well. I got a lot of experience from playing last year where, if I'm being dead honest with you, I absolutely bricked it when I was stood on that walk-on. It's probably the most nervous I've ever been in a game of darts, and I learned from the previous year how to handle myself on the walk-on, and I beat Rob, played really well, and I think we gave the fans a game they wanted in Manchester, and it was me and Luke Littler, and he beat me yet again. It was amazing, and Manchester will always be my favourite. But there's so many good venues now. A lot of the players like the Dublin Premier League. Dublin brings a fantastic atmosphere. They're all great, but Manchester's number one for me.
Fair enough. Well, you alluded to the World Matchplay going back to last year. We've got to mention that win. You said it was the proudest moment of your career so far, your second major title. How many times have you watched the clip back of that match-winning dart in the final?
The only time I ever watch it is, obviously, again, we'll come on to this, I'm sure, but because I've had a bit of a bad year and with injuries and that, and, at times when you're thinking about jacking it in, I always should click it in YouTube and remember them, the good times, shall we say, and that was, like I said, many, many times. It was probably the one of the proudest moments of my life, let alone just my darts career, and it was a memory that will last me forever, and it was amazing, and I thought I would have kicked on after winning that. Clearly I haven't, but it was still an amazing week, and to have Kirsty and the girls with me, my mum and everyone was there, it was amazing, and it was one tournament that I really wanted to win in my career, and I did it.
Yeah, special moment. And your first major, we mentioned earlier, the UK Open. I don't know if it was different for you, but we've had the last two winners on the show. Andrew Gilden, he celebrated with a pot noodle. Dimitri Vandenberg this year said it was a very quiet celebration, but I imagine winning the match player a Sunday night in Blackpool, the options are endless. So how did you celebrate that win?
It would have been if I didn't have my two kids with me. I would have been in the old clubs in Blackpool knowing me. But we went back to the hotel, and the manager was with me. Gary Plummer from Target was there, and we had a couple of drinks on the Saturday evening after my semi-final win, and he was like, right, if you win, I'll get you a bottle of Dom Perignon, and we'll have a glass of champagne. So obviously I won, and obviously we were only in Blackpool, so the hotel had to dig down into the wine cellar to find a bottle of champagne for us, and we had a couple of glasses of champagne, and to be fair, we had an early night because we was up in the morning and drove back to Stockport with the kids, and that was it really. I did a lot more celebrating when I won the UK Open, if I'm deadly honest, than the match play, because I'm pretty sure like 2 or 3 days after that, I flew somewhere for a World Series event, so I didn't really have much. I flew to Australia actually, so we didn't really have time to celebrate as much as I would have liked. But I'm getting older now. My party days are over, so I've just spent it with my partner and my kids, and we made the most of it. Yeah,
still some good times. And one more on last year, we saw you go and see 50 Cent in concert and meet him as well. How was that, and did you consider changing your walk-on to one of his songs afterwards?
Well, you know what, actually tipped up, and one of his security came over to me and said 50 said that he was there. He wanted to meet me. I didn't really. I love all my hip hop and my rap, and I bought me and Kirsty tickets, and there was an opportunity to meet him, so obviously I grabbed it with both hands, and it was an amazing experience. But you know what, I would love to change my walk, not to the 50 Cent song, but to like an Eminem song or something, but I don't think the fans or the PDC would really appreciate me walking out to Lose Yourself instead of Mr. Brightside, to be honest. But it was a great experience, and we've got a whole Eminem tour next year now, because he's the one that I want to meet.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And the Mr. Brightside walk-on, I was there in Manchester at the Premier League this year. It's become one of the most popular walk-ons in the game. You might be sick of hearing that song now, but have you been to see the Killers perform it live yet?
No, I haven't. The amount of times I get tagged in stuff, like you need to get Nathan to walk out to it, and this, that and the other. And funny story, really, when we was in Vegas this year, me and Smithy, a guy that we was with has quite a lot of connections, and he was speaking to like the Killers record label, trying to get me to meet them in Vegas. Obviously that's where they're from, and ironically the weekend that we were in Vegas, they were performing at Manchester. So in our opposite home territory, shall we say. So, no, I've never met them, but I'm sure as long as I'm walking out to Mr. Brightside and keeping it in the charts for them, I'm sure our paths will cross at some point in the future.
Yeah, one day it'll happen. Well, let's get on to this year. You were back in Blackpool for that World Matchplay title defence, and you touched on it. Unfortunately, you went into it not at 100%. You took a break after that event. You said to us, wanted to play pain-free again. Before it was the wrist injury, now the elbow, which you've had treatment on. The physical challenge is tough, but how mentally challenging have these injuries been?
Yeah, it's been tough, and I'm trying to be the, what's the word? I won't say ambassador, that's the wrong word, but I'm trying to be the guy that tries to support other lads now on the tour that are going through something similar, trying to tell them that, you know, if you have got an injury, playing through it is not the right thing to do. You know, people are so scared of falling down the rankings and or not qualifying for this or not qualifying for that, and what a lot of the lads forget is how young we are still. So I rushed back last time after my wrist injury, and I was never right. But when I came back after my wrist, I was still in pain, and I just played for 18 months with, you know, like taking tablets, putting gel on it, strapping up, and you can't beat these players if you're not 100%. So when my elbow completely went, you know, I seek professional advice, and everyone was on the same opinion that I need to walk away from the game for a bit and do the proper treatment and come back 100%. Otherwise, I'm just going to spend the next 15 years of my career with injuries. So I knew it was a big risk defending. You know, so I didn't know I was going to be back for the Grand Prix. Luckily, I was, but you know, there were certain events that I knew I had to play in really to defend my ranking event, but I looked at the bigger picture. If I'm not back, it is what it is. I'm good enough. I'm confident in my own ability that even if I miss 6 months, I can get back to the top. And that's what I'm going to have to probably do, you know, because of what I didn't qualify for the Grand Slam. You know, just missed out on the Grand Prix against Ryan Joyce. Like I say, I know next year is a massive year for me, but I wouldn't change it. You know, the treatment was intense. It was tough, mentally challenging, being away from the game so long. But, you know, come out the other side of it now, and, you know, I'm pleased to say that I've got absolutely no pain whatsoever. I'm 100% fit. You know, if anything, I'm more fit now than I've ever been because I've started doing a lot of fitness and stuff away from the game. So overall, the right decision. And, you know, hopefully now I'm 100% fit with a bit of luck on the side, a bit of confidence from having a decent run. Next year could probably be my best year I've ever had.
Great to hear that you're back to 100%, and you made your return to the oche in September. We've seen you in a few TV events, the Pro Tours as well. The last Pro Tour, you had a different look. You were one of the players dressed up as Steve Beaton for his last Players' Championship. We've got to ask, where did the idea come from? Because we saw the pictures in the video. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I can't actually remember who it was. Like the lads that sit on the table on Pro Tours, they're all fantastic guys. You know, myself, Dobie, Johnny, Joe, Ross Smith, and Adam Hunt, Andy Bolton, Joycey. We have a great laugh. You know, I think if you ever come into a Pro Tour, you can just hear one table, and it's us lot. We just have a laugh. We enjoy ourselves, and you know, we're all so close. And obviously, we knew Steve was finishing this year, and he's been not only for darts but for us lads as well. You know, we're young lads, and he's helped all of us. You know, myself, Joe, Dobie. He's been a mentor to us all over the last 6-7 years. And we just wanted to give him a send-off and let him know how much he actually meant to us all, and someone could just dressing up as him, which we thought was absolutely fantastic. We blagged Ryan Joyce to say that we'd all put him false tan on to look like him, and he was like, yeah, I'm up for that. And unfortunately, we actually really thought on the Thursday afternoon he was going to tip up with a load of false tan on, but he didn't, unfortunately for us. That would have been brilliant. But now we did it, and I spoke to the PDC, made them aware of what we were doing, trying to get like a bit of filming for Steve and for social, and it was a great send-off, and you know, I don't think there's anyone else on the tour that deserves it more than him, and he really appreciated it. We went out for a curry. at the night, and it was a great send off for a fantastic guy and legend of the game.
Yeah, echoing that. And just lastly on Steve as well, Monday next week we've got the tour card holder qualifiers for Ali Pally. Are you going to be keeping one eye on Dart Connect to see if he can qualify?
Yeah, definitely. I think there should be a petition if you don't qualify to stick him in anyway. There's so many spots up for grabs for different qualifiers from all over the world. Let's take one away from Outer Mongolia and give it Steve P. But he played well. You know what I mean? We keep saying still a fantastic dart player. Probably not top 32, but he's still a top 64 in the world player in my eyes anyway. So I think he'll get through. I think he's destined to. If there is a God out there, they'll be shining down on him come next Monday, and he'll get a place, because I think what he's done for the game, he deserves one final send off, and what better place to do it than Alabama.
Yeah, we've all got our fingers crossed. Well, we'll finish up with some listener questions before we let you go. The first one comes from Azra, who says, probably been answered already elsewhere, but why have you gone back to your old darts?
So I've actually changed them even further, which you'll all see on Friday night. But basically, obviously, while I've been off with my injury, I've had time to reflect on my performance and stuff. And even though I won the match play with my new darts and I produced great numbers, I feel like the consistency wasn't there with them. I feel like I was more consistent back in 2019, 2020, 2021 than I am now. I believe my scoring's not as good with these new darts. So, a combination of a lot of things, really. I was so focused on trying to make my darts slimmer to try and get more in the treble 20, when in actual fact, based on stats, I used to hit more 180s with my old darts and my new darts. So, go back to basics, go back to what works week in, week out, and that was my old dart. So, could have been off for 4 months. I thought, why not? I'll give him a go. And as soon as I put him in my hand, I just kind of felt at home with him, and I've stuck with him since. And like I say, I've done another tweak ahead of this weekend, which will be obvious to see for everyone the second to throw a dart. So I'm not going to ruin it. Watch them Friday. But they just feel fantastic, these old darts.
Excellent. And Tracy says that she's been rehabbing golfer's elbow since January, almost better apart from flare-ups, not back playing yet, but can Nathan chat about his treatment plan and how he felt throughout the injury? Very glad he's back at the oche. Fingers crossed I'll be soon too.
Yeah, so it started off with golfer's elbow and like tendonitis. So I went through something called shockwave therapy. And I'm no doctor, but basically what I've been told is if you have ligament or tendon damage, or like let's say golfer's elbow or tennis elbow, if it's not healed within 6 weeks, your brain stops sending good blood to it. It thinks that it's healed. So what this shockwave therapy does is it's kind of like imagine like a big pen with a big ball bearing on the end, and it just keeps whacking the injured area. So what it does is it flares it up and it reminds your brain that there's still an injury there. So it keeps sending all the good blood to that particular area. So that was what I had. I had about nine treatments of that once a week. But then once that was healed, I was still in a bit of pain. So I had a scan on my elbow, and they noticed that I kind of had like a floating bone in my actual elbow joint. And that was what was causing a lot of it as well. So I had to have some plasma injected directly into my elbow joint, as well as some cortisone. And I've actually got to have a scan in January to make sure that this bone has kind of settled and it's not irritating my elbow anymore. If it is irritating it, then I'll have to get it shaved off in January. But at the moment, there's nothing there. So it's one of them, anything to do with joints and ligaments, from what I've been told from doctors and stuff like that, and what I've had my own experience, is time heals. So doing nothing with that area for as long as you possibly can, as well as seeking like the best treatment you can get. And like I say, it took me 3 months, but touch wood, there's absolutely nothing at all wrong with it now.
Yeah, hopefully that scan comes through okay. And the next one, they want to know, when are you next coming to Stockport Junior Darts Academy?
when I've got a weekend off. I've got to stop booking exhibitions. I think that's what the problem is. I will be there. Depends on the draw for the World Championships. I could be there on the last one before Christmas. It all depends on when I'm playing at the World Championship. Generally speaking, they always stick me on the bloody 23rd at the night. So chances are I'll be there before Christmas. But if not, all I'll say to the lads from the Stockport Darts Academy, there's some exciting announcements in January. So if you don't see me before Christmas, you'll definitely see me the first couple of weeks in Jan.
There we go. And last one before we let you go, Connor Troy wants to know, does Nathan think he needs a strong end to the year to be in Premier League contention for 2025?
That's one word for it. Yeah. Listen, I love the Premier League. Everyone knows I love the Premier League. At the moment, I think there's more chance of you being in it than me.
Get in.
If I'm deadly honest with you. But, yeah, it's I definitely need a strong end to the year. I think if you have a decent run at the World, even a quarters or a semi-final, I think that would put me in it. Making the final of the Minehead one this weekend would put me in it. I don't think I have to win it, if I'm deadly honest, because I think come the end of the year, I think I'm 10 or 11. So if I can make some decent ranking money, I think if I get in the top 8, I think I'm in with a shout. Just because what I bring to the Premier League as well with the walk-on and the way they play the game. They don't want to put 8 guys in it that are all like the same, just walk on their stone face to play the game and walk off. I think there's certain people that bring a different presence to stage, in my opinion. So I think the PDC want me in it as much as I want to be in it, if I'm deadly honest with you. But at the moment, there's a hell of a lot more players that deserve that spot more than me. So yeah, big end of the year, and I'll be back. If not, then I've got something to aim for the following year.
Well, Nathan, it's always a pleasure to get you on the show. Thanks for giving us so much of your time. Best of luck with Minehead, Ali Pally, and we'll see if I'll be playing you in the Premier League next year.
We'll see, mate. We'll play the car park, me and you.
Thanks again to Nathan for joining us. Now continuing our look back at the Grand Slam of Darts. Plenty of talking points during the 9 days of action in Wolverhampton. So what else caught your eye at this year's Grand Slam?
Well, I think I have to start with the 2 semifinalists, the 2 beaten semifinalists, that is. I'll start with Gary Anderson. We've been talking for a year and a half now about how well Gary Anderson had been playing, but it wasn't being duplicated on the televised stage. Some of it being that he ran into some big performances, but some of it he just wasn't bringing that same game. And maybe, as much as he hates the European Tour, maybe getting that experience of winning on the big stage again in Europe earlier this year helped out, because he came in to Wolverhampton and was one of the players of the tournament early on. 113 average against Ryan Joyce, 105 against some guy named Michael Van Guren. When's the last time he beat MVG in a major tournament on the big stage? Oh, wait, just a few weeks ago. But those levels of performances, yeah, it's what we expected out of him 6-7 years ago when he was the world number 2, when he was the twice in reigning world champion. But we haven't seen that on the big stage since then, especially not consecutive matches. And it wasn't as dominant after that, but it was still pretty darn good after that in the knockout stages. Basically 100 against Stephen Bunting, who, I was fancying to make a run out of it at that point. And Bunting played fairly well, and did well to try to get himself back in that match after going off stage 8-2 down. But Gary Anderson never took the foot off the pedal. And then against Jan van Veen in the quarterfinals, again, 99 average, a great performance against one of the other breakout players from this tournament. And Van Veen's on my list as well, so I'll come back to talk to him about him in a second. And then he had chances to beat Luke Littler, but it took a monumental performance by the young superstar to deny him in that match. This is the best we've seen on television out of Gary Anderson in years, maybe since before the pandemic. Yeah, I know he made the world final during lockdown, but there was nothing even in that tournament that was nearly at this level and this consistency. This was a great week from Gary Anderson, and it makes him one of the players to look out for in the World Championships coming up. The other beaten semifinalist, Mickey Mansell, also on my list. As I said at the beginning of the show, he'd already qualified after only 2 matches in a group that had the world number 1 and James Wade in it. He qualified first. He ended up not winning the group after losing his last match, but can you fault him? What was there to play for? He was already out of that group and looking ahead to later rounds. A very good performance against Danny Noppert, and then that match against Cameron Menzies where, yeah, it was not a classic, even though it went 16-15, but it was a match that was more like 23-8. Mansell was the dominant player for the last 2/3 of that match, and just Menzies hit everything at the right time and took advantage of some mistakes from Mansell to force a last leg decider. But Mansell was the dominant player in that match, and it just seemed like he ran out of steam in the end against Martin Lukeman. But what a week for the Colono Cyclone, first major semifinal. And then briefly, I said Jan van Veen. I mean, how he's not won a title yet, I have no idea. But coming out of the group of death, well, it was the group of death for everyone else. Van Veen was absolutely clinical and then some in all of his matches. 110, 114, 104, won them all. Vessel Nyman, he should also catch an eye. 3rd highest average ever in the World Grand Prix. In the Grand Slam of Darts, and he didn't win a match. But Jan van Veen, great week for him. And then finally, very quickly, Mike de Decker survived his group, but then pushed Luke Littler, playing like the stuff of a major champion. It's, we haven't seen much of him since he's won his first major, because it hasn't been that much, but he's showing that that's not a fluke. He didn't go that far in the end, but he showed that he's going to go far again.
Yeah, a lot of great moments there. And I've got to say, the Grand Slam, it used to be one of my favourite tournaments, the very early days when it was on ITV, and I touched a bit on it last week. I felt like the tournament, it was still finding its new identity now that we don't have that cross-code PDC versus BDO element anymore. But this year's event, it felt like a big step in the right direction for me. And you mentioned a lot of the things that happened during the tournament. There were plenty of surprises during the week, not just in the group stages, but the last 16, the quarterfinals, and you touched on it. We had those 2 surprising semi-finalists in terms of the Sky events, Mickey Mansell versus Martin Lukeman in the Grand Slam semi-finals, one of the most unexpected semi-finals for some time, but both thoroughly deserving of their places on that final Sunday. And yeah, a lot of great games to watch. We'll touch on it more in a moment. I'm sure that Luke Littler, Gary Anderson semi-final, but even before that, Luke Littler against Mike de Decker in the last 16, Gary Anderson versus Jan van Veen in the quarterfinals. Any match in Group H you could probably put in there as well. You mentioned about Van Veen, how he topped the group with those averages. Wessel Nyman somehow finishing without a win for his efforts, 106, 105, 111 averages, and he'll probably qualify for the Grand Slam next year, drop 10 points on his average and win his group. That's just the way darts goes sometimes. But aside from those, the most dramatic group, Group B, with Cameron Menzies losing 5-1 to Bo Greaves, and he tweeted us he was in the car in a huff on the way home and he thought he was out of the tournament. And then Martin Schindler missing those 4 darts at a double to win his 3rd leg against Danny Noppert, which would have sent him through. Menzies, he's back after his shift at work. He's playing in the last 16, and it was his best run in a PDC major to date, getting to the quarterfinals and losing that 16-15 epic to Mickey Mansell. But yeah, aside from that, lots of drama. But I've got to finish on a sadder note, really, and that was the final stages of that Littler de Decker game and the whistling from the crowd, which I thought was bang out of order. And the Sky broadcast, their post-match debrief, didn't give a mention to it, but one of our listeners got in touch and said that the Dutch broadcast, which has the Goat Coast Stompe in the studio, they flagged it up, and they even had de Decker in for an interview afterwards where he was very honest in what he thought about the crowd and the lack of support from the referee and the PDC to do something about it. And yeah, for me, it left a bad taste seeing that happen after what was such a brilliant game to watch. And we saw for the rest of the tournament, Luke Littler doesn't need the crowd, the fans to whistle against his opponents. He's more than good enough to win by himself. So I hope that when we get to Ali Pali, where the crowds, they can be a lot more hostile, that we see all the players given the best of order.
Now we come on to our question of the week, sponsored by Condor Darts. And what is your match of the year so far this year? The choices being the UK Open Classic between Damon Hedda and Luke Littler, the World Grand Prix final between Mike De Decker and Luke Humphreys, or the Grand Slam of Darts semifinal between Luke Littler and Gary Anderson, or are you going off the board with the other pick?
Yeah, if you saw my darts in the Preston tournament a couple of weeks ago, I usually do go off the board. But yeah, brilliant response so far from our listeners on our poll on Twitter. More than 500 votes, so do go and have your say. But at the time of recording, 58% of our listeners going with Littler Anderson, 23% going with Heta Littler at the UK Open, 15% going with that Grand Prix final, Humphreys and De Decker, 4% going with other. And I'll read out a few of our listeners that have been in touch, their thoughts on it. Hugo Darts has said De Decker versus Humphreys was a beauty of a match in terms of drama. It's the absolute best of 2024. Juso Malinan, apologies if I've pronounced that wrong, says perhaps it's Littler v Ando, but the UK Open final, Dimitri v Humphreys, definitely deserves a mention as well. What a great match it was. Dry Russ saying unbelievable recency bias. Heta Littler was absolutely insane. And the last one I'll read out, Magnus Sheila saying, I feel like Australia versus Italy deserves a shout. That was incredible. And just a side note, we are going to start to plan for the Weekly Dartscast Awards. It is the most comprehensive awards in world darts, so get your tuxedos, your ball gowns ready for that after Ali Pali. And the match of the year, it's always one of the most competitive awards, and just with those three matches in our poll alone, I find it hard to split them. And then you throw in other contenders as well, it is going to be very hard to decide. So I'm glad that our listeners are going to be doing the voting and deciding the winners. And Dry Ross mentioned unbelievable recency bias. I'm afraid I might have to be falling into that category here as well, because that semi-final on Sunday afternoon between Gary Anderson and Luke Littler, it was incredible. I mentioned earlier I was in the crowd in Wolverhampton on Sunday, and from memory, it's probably the best match I've had the pleasure of watching live. You just couldn't take your eyes off it, and the atmosphere inside the arena, I did feel very lucky to be there in person too, to experience it. And there was a lot of fans in the crowd wearing the Luke Littler club replicas. It was £60 a pop on the merchandise stand for one of them, by the way. But I think by the end, those fans wouldn't have minded either way who won that game, because it was that gripping and exciting to watch. And the game itself, the first ever meeting between these two, it was hyped up, and it lived up to the hype. Littler 7-4 up, Anderson winning 7 legs on the spin to go 11-7 up. He kept that lead almost until the end, 13-9, 14-12, 15-14, but Littler 2-14 darts to get over the line by the very finest of margins. So yeah, I think that's winning it for me at the moment. I will throw in a wild card though, and that is Peter Wachuri versus Cameron Carolison, the African qualifier for the World Championship, that final, because that got a lot of excitement going as well. And probably based on our listeners, that'll be the one that wins the vote. And if it is, I can't wait to reach out to Peter and Cameron and get them to both send in a video accepting the award.
I'm gonna have to agree with you, and it is tough to know when is it recency bias and when is it legitimate. And we talk about this not every year, but every other year it seems after the World Final, because half the time it is a question: is that the best World Final ever? And usually we say no, and we'll say it's the third best, and then the following year when we ask the question again, we don't even remember the previous year's final, which shows that recency bias was the only reason we put it in the top three. But recency bias is a little less pronounced when we're still talking just a matter of months between the two. And I mean, the De Decker Humphreys World Grand Prix final was a great final, but it was not in the same realm as either of these other two matches. And I think there are good arguments both ways between Heta Littler and Littler Anderson. I mean, Damon Heta, how he managed to win that match and win it comfortably in the end is beyond me, because Luke Littler didn't really do anything wrong, but Damon Heta hit at every single opportunity and just won a match between two players who were playing very well. But it was still only a best of 19 match. It was earlier in the tournament. Littler Anderson was a semifinal, a spot in the final later that day on the line in one of the biggest tournaments on Sky in a match that came in with all the hype in the world. And as you said, it lived up to it and it exceeded it. And yeah, okay, it wasn't averages of 108, but it was still averages north of 100 over 31 legs with pressure on pretty much every shot throughout. Gary Anderson having to take out 4-ton-plus finishes, first to turn the match around and then to, go out into the lead. But then Luke Littler just came right back at him and fought his way back. And you never once thought Anderson has this. Even when he won those 7 legs on a spin to go 11-7 up, you knew this match was far from over. Hedda Littler was a great match. It was an undoubted contender for match of the year. Littler Anderson was an all-time classic. That's the difference. So yes, there's a little recency bias, but Littler Anderson is a match that I will remember and talk about 5 years down the line. Hedda Littler is a match that when I'm looking through the history books, I'll remember, oh yeah, that was a great match. So I have to go Littler Anderson. And while there are arguments both ways, and I hope something will happen the rest of the year that makes me forget about Littler Anderson, it's going to take something historic to beat it.
Hi, I'm Russ Bray, and you're listening to the Weekly Dartscast 180.
I'm pleased to say we're joined once again by Jack Milner from our sponsors Kwiff to look ahead to the Players' Championship finals. Jack, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, pal. A bit of a skinner for the bookmakers last week. I think Luke was the favourite pretty much throughout the entirety of the tournament, the Grand Slam, and didn't really look him down, did he? He was a bit like vintage Taylor back in his pom way. Even if he got, again, he was a couple of legs down early doors in the final, but that's quite easy to rectify when you win 15 on the spin. So yeah, he does look to be the man to beat at present. It'll be fascinating to see if the groundswell of support, again, every media outlet was publishing. I think if you look on somebody like the Sun Sport website, they are producing 3 to 5 Luke Littler articles every day. So clearly there's an appetite there for the darting public, but then he has also transcended the sport and has now become popular within the mainstream and popular within sports readers, themselves. So yeah, fascinating to see how he handles the pressure and how he handles the burden of being the favourite for the World Championships.
Yeah, we'll touch on the World Championships in a moment. We have got one stop before Ali Pali. It is the Players' Championship finals in Minehead this weekend. It can be an event that does spring up a surprise quarter-finalist, semi-finalist, finalist over the years. But let's get into our parlay. Burton and I, we've made our picks. Jack, you've made yours. 2 picks each for the first round on Friday. Burton's gone with Stephen Bunting and Kevin Doots. I've gone with Alan Suter and Ryan Joyce. Jack, who are you backing and what does that look like for an overall accumulator for our listeners?
My 2, I've added James Wade against Stephen Burton, and I've gone with Wesley, I can never pronounce his name right, Wesley Glacier against Mencier Sulovic. I do think Wade is, whilst he's not quite at his best, I think he's shown glimpses this year of, he kind of has that steeliness to get through some of these almost like banana skin type games. So Wade at 1.28 and Glacier, so obviously big talent that I think is going to do great things over the next 10-15 years. Mencier, I don't think Mencier's had a great couple of seasons ever since getting out of the Premier League. So Glacier 1.55. If you add in the 6-fold altogether of Joyce, Bunting, Suter and Andrew Gilding, I think it's just a shade from 16 to 1, 16.98. 16 to 1 for the 6-fold, and obviously that could be significantly higher thanks to the Kwiff and the power of the Supergiant. So 16 to 1 for the 6-fold for the R6 picks to get through to the second round.
Excellent, yeah. Always a chance to supercharge your odds with Kwiff. And just looking at the outrights as well for this weekend, I'm assuming that after his Grand Slam win at the weekend, Luke Littler's going to go in as the favourite. Anyone else take your eye from the outrights for this weekend?
You would be correct. I would say last week I thought Gary would have a really good week. I think you mentioned before the Grand Slam's one of his favourite tournaments, and you and I were saying off air, if you beat Luke Littler, there's a good chance you go on to win the tournament. The problem was Gary Anderson was facing Luke Littler in the semi-finals, and I thought it was a phenomenal game of darts. I'd love to see the two of them go at it on the Ali Pali stage. I think Gary is in good form. He's 9 to 1. This week down in Minehead. I'm not sure whether I'd be convinced about him down here. He's not used to that tough schedule. As he keeps saying, it's a young man's game. As he, you'll see him scratching his collarbone with his wee index finger. Gary Henderson 9-1, but Luke Littler, I think it's going to be one of the Lukes this week. Luke Littler 3-1 favourite. Luke Humphries 4-1. I would err on the side of caution for Littler back, as he does face Rob Cross in the first round, and Rob. A bit of a banana skin last week. I thought Rob would have got to the final to face Littler. Disappointed, obviously, prior to that, but Rob Cross is probably a good price. If you think he's going to beat Luke Littler, you should probably back Rob Cross at 40-1 rather than backing 3-1 to beat Littler. But the two Lukes had the market: Luke Littler 3-1 and Luke Humphries 4-1 with Kwiff this week in Minehead. Yeah,
Luke Humphries, the defending champion as well. It was one of the majors that he won last season. Luke Littler is going to be a debut for him, but we've got to touch on as well, before we let you go, Jack, the outrights for the World Championship coming up, because since winning that Grand Slam, we understand Luke Littler has gone favourite for Ali Pali.
Gone favourite, yeah. He's now the 2-1 market leader with ourselves at Kwiff. Just on share that I said before. 2-1. Luke Humphries, the defending champion, we've seen not many players go back to back. He's Burlington Bertie 130 to successfully defend the Sid Waddell Trophy. Thinking, what is it? We've seen Taylor, Anderson, Lewis, the only three players I can think to have successfully defended the title. Michael Smith obviously had a bit of a horror show the 12 months after claiming the trophy and disappointed early doors last year, but Luke Humphries probably looks of a different calibre of player, different attitude, different mindset. I could see him still being popular at the prices. Luke Littler 2-1, Luke Humphries 130. Luke Humphries 130. Michael Van Gerwen 9-1, Gary Anderson 12. And interesting money in the past week for Mike De Decker. He was as big as 66-1 before winning the Grand Prix. He's now as short as 22-1 to our first World Championships January 3rd in Ali Pali. And the other one that's attracted a bit of support is Wessel Neiman. So people are almost saying give you the chance. Mike De Decker, Jan Van Veen and Wessel Neiman all nibbled in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, some great picks there, and all impressed at the Grand Slam last week as well. Jack, it's always good to get you on. We appreciate the support you've got for the show as well, and we've got Lakeside coming right round the corner as well next week.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm flying in. We'll be setting up a Kwiff zone there on site. If anyone listens to this podcast, give me a tag or follow me on Twitter at JGM Sports, and we'll bring you in there and have a chuck and maybe a couple of free beverages going. But yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up with the boys next week at the Lakeside.
Happy days, Jack. Enjoy the weekend of darts in Minehead, and we'll see you in Lakeside next week.
Cheers, boys. Go well. Speak to you later.
Now we'll finish up the show with a look ahead. Plenty of darts coming up over the weekend and into next week. Starting off with the Players' Championship finals in Minehead, the last major stop before the big one. The draw's already set, so which first round ties do you most like the look of?
Well, there's quite a few, as we would expect. And originally I was going to try to do like what we normally try to do, which is take one from each quarter of the draw. But in the end, I couldn't just pick one from the top quarter because there's no way to just pick one from the top quarter. And so I'm going to pick three from the top quarter and then quickly mention two others. Starting right at the very top, Chris Dobie, the top seed, Nathan Aspinall, the 64th seed. And of course, you guys heard from the Asp earlier. A bizarre match to think that your reward for topping the order of merit over the 30 Players' Championship events throughout season 2024 is to go against a twice major champion, including someone who was in the Premier League this year. But that's Chris Dobie's reward. It's been an uneven season for Aspinall, partially due to injury, but it's still a match I want to see, because if he can fire, that's a match that could go 6-0 in either direction. They're both good enough. You wouldn't expect it to go 6-0, but they both have that ability to just roll out 6 legs on the spin and average 110. It should be hopefully a much more competitive match than that. Hopefully they're both averaging 110 and we see 11 legs. Also in that top quarter, another recent major champion. I talked about him not that long ago today, and that's Mike De Decker going against Richard Veenstra. And we've talked a little bit about Veenstra, but we don't talk about him that often because he still hasn't fully found his feet in the PDC. He's the 49th seed, and I think that's fair. He's a player who is at least should comfortably qualify for this event each year. He should comfortably qualify for the World Championships each year. But he still has gears to go through to start moving up the rankings. And having a deep run in a major championship might be what he needs to start pushing himself further. It is a tough draw, being that De Decker is a major champion. He's won in the Players' Championship circuit this year. He's improving. And, if you're improving when you've already won a major, you're a pretty darn good player. But Richard Veenstra is a player who can match him. I want to see this match. I want to see what Veenstra can do. And he might not be on De Decker's level right now, but there's a game there waiting to unleash itself. Also in the top quarter, I'm just going to mention this one. There's no point to discuss it because obviously it's going to be a match worth watching. Luke Littler, Rob Cross. We've talked about both of those players enough over the course of the last year. We'll talk about them enough over the course of the next 390 episodes. But we'll go to other quarters. I picked out 2 other matches. One from the third quarter might not be one that jumps off the page if you haven't been paying close attention this year, but it does jump off the page if you have. And that's the 18th seed, Michael Smith, against the player who's 18th in averages so far this year in Players' Championship events, Dom Taylor. It's been a quietly good year for Dom Taylor, one of the breakout seasons of anyone this year, even if he hasn't gotten the prize money to back it up. But you look at who has beaten him this year, and I talked about Veenstra just a minute ago. It's a similar thing with Dom Taylor. Last year, Veenstra, for the first 20-something events, lost to people who had won majors or made major finals or won European tours for 20-something events in a row. Not quite the same level for Dom Taylor, but for Players' Championships 18 through 28, 11 consecutive events, the person who beat him was a TV tournament winner. That's 11 events in a row that you had to be a winner of a televised event in order to be able to beat Dom Taylor. He did beat a couple of televised event winners during that streak as well, but lost the vast majority of them. That's been the big reason why he's the 47th seed and not the 20th seed. He's not won these matches against the better players, even if he's playing pretty close to their level overall. A big opportunity for Dom Taylor. But again, he's going against a major televised tournament winner in Michael Smith. And then lastly, another match that might not jump off the page, same quarter, but it's one I want to see. Alan Suter against Jermaine Watamina. We've talked about Watamina quite a bit recently, but we haven't talked as much about Alan Suter, but he's won a title. He's rectified his game and secured his spot on tour next year after last year was a big regression. This is a tough ask for him, but he's playing well enough, and it's a match that, as I said, doesn't jump off the page, but it's a match that if you do end up watching it, you can be like, I'm glad I tuned in.
Yeah, some good picks there, and we've known the draw for a few weeks now. You'll have heard from one of our guests on this week's show, Nathan Aspinall, earlier. He said the banter had started between him and his first round opponent in Minehead, Chris Dobie, as soon as the last Players' Championship finished and the draw was confirmed. But now we've got the schedule of play from the PDC, so we know when all the matches in the first round are going to take place. So I'm going to do it slightly differently. I'm going to pick 4 matches, 2 from each of the 2 sessions, and then 1 from each of the 2 stages, the main stage and stage 2. So kicking off with the afternoon session on the main stage, I'm going to go with Martin Lukeman against Connor Scott. These 2 are practice partners, as you all know from Martin's interview on stage after he beat Rob Cross on Friday night at the Grand Slam. He was giving everyone a plug. He mentioned he practices a lot with Connor. They travelled up to Wolverhampton together as well for the Grand Slam. Martin, he's going to be on cloud 9 after that run to the final. And for Connor Scott, his debut in the Grand Slam couldn't have got off to a better start. Thrashed Dave Chisnell 5-0 with a 104 average, but it unravelled for him after that, losing to Richie Adalster and Ross Smith with 285 averages. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he responds and how Martin Lukeman follows up that Grand Slam final run. Stage 2 in the afternoon, my game to watch is going to be Dirk van Dijvenbode against Callum Ridds. Whether it ends up being 6-0 or 6-5, it's going to be over fairly quickly, isn't it? They both play at a decent pace, and I think that will be a very watchable game. On to the evening session, when a lot of the big hitters are going to come out. Your Humphreys, your Littlers, playing against Rob Cross, Gary Andersons, Van Gerwen's, but I'm picking out one of the ties that you picked out, and that is Chris Dobey against Nathan Aspinall, the number 1 seed against the number 64 seed, who just managed to get into the field for Minehead, and both, I'm sure, have got aspirations of being in the Premier League next year. So a deep run here, especially right at the end of the season, it could make all the difference. And it starts with a win on Friday night. Whoever can get through can hopefully go on that run for themselves and put themselves in contention for the Premier League, and probably more importantly, get some momentum going into the World Championships. And then lastly, another game that you mentioned is on stage 2 on Friday night. And speaking of the Premier League, Michael Smith, you'd think he needs a run either here or at the Worlds to keep his spot. And against Dom Taylor, someone that I think is going to have a run somewhere. I've been saying it a few times this year. Maybe it does come here, and this game being on stage 2 away from the bright lights of the main stage, it could be the perfect platform for him to cause the upset.
And then it's not just the Players' Championship finals that we have to look forward to before we record again, but on Monday will be the PDPA qualifier for the World Championship. We'll have the last 3, potentially 4 spots in Ali Pali to play for, depending on whether Jan van Veen wins the World Youth on Sunday. We ask this every year. I don't know if we ever get it right, or we might get one right, because it is even harder to predict than Q School. But who at least do you want to see come through and win those spots?
Yeah, it's always a difficult one to predict. And I think we've said it before on the show, for us as darts fans, this qualifier, it's one of the most exciting days of darts we follow, where you don't actually see any of the darts going the board. We're reliant on Dart Connect, which has made following these events, these qualifiers, a lot more enjoyable for us. And it's a massive day for a lot of players. You're talking tour cards on the line for some players. If they miss out on the Worlds, they're out, or they've got a nervy wait for results at Ali Pali to see if they stay in the top 64. For some other players, this qualifier, it can save a season or potentially change a career. You go back to the first year we did this podcast, 2017, this qualifier back then, Jamie Lewis took one of the 3 spots, ended up going all the way to the semi-finals, losing out to Phil Taylor in his last ever World Championship. Who do I want to come through on Monday? Yeah, I don't want to put the jinx on anyone, but top of my list, and I'm sure he's going to be top of many people's lists, is Steve Beaton. We saw at the last Players' Championship event of the year a few of the players dressing up as Steve with the wigs and the white shirts to mark their respect to him. And yeah, this is going to be Steve Beaton's last event in the PDC unless he can win through this qualifier, and it would be a sad ending for him if it is the last one. We want it to be that full send-off at Ali Pali. He deserves that. So I'm hoping that the Bronze Adonis, he can produce one more big day on the floor, get one of those spots. And sticking with the Legends theme, I'll throw out Simon Whitlock as well. He's been in 20 consecutive World Championships, going back to 2005 in the BDO at Lakeside to last year at Ali Pali, but didn't make it this year. And if he doesn't come through those qualifiers on Monday, his tour card is really up for, well, it's in trouble, isn't it? And if he does drop out that top 64, we don't know what his plans are going to be for 2025. You'd think he might go over to the seniors, the Modus Super Series. It's right on his doorstep in Portsmouth. He's got a lot of other avenues. So, yeah, this is a very interesting time for him. And 1 or 2 more. I'll give a mention to Rhys Griffin, a friend of mine. It would be superb to see him win through those qualifiers. He won through the World Series qualifiers for Amsterdam, so he's done it before. Hopefully he can do it again and cap off his first year on the tour on a high. And lastly, if there is going to be that 4th spot, if Jan van Veen wins the World Youth on Sunday night, let's go for Adam Warner. Who doesn't want to see those cream chinos on the Ali Pali stage?
Well, I will have to start the same place you started. And in fact, I might just go 3 answers of Steve Beaton, Steve Beaton, and Steve Beaton. I'd like to see Steve Beaton get to the World Championships. It was not a bad year for him, but it was not a good enough year to qualify for the World Championships. But there definitely were some signs that he was at least making that run. You know, you go back to August where he made the semifinal before going out to Ryan Searle, but he never really found consistency after that, never even made another board final. Only after that played in the Euro Tour as well that he got in through the reserve list. It wasn't a good enough year for him, but maybe it'll be a good enough day. You never know. It just takes one big run on that Monday to get in. Beyond that, you mentioned Simon Whitlock, Mervyn King as well, Vincent van der Voort, players who have been around forever. Both of them missed it last year, so their streaks ended. But they're likely going to lose their tour card. It could be a last go for both of them to get one more trip to a World Championships. I wouldn't begrudge either of them getting through, as long as they don't drawn into the same section as Steve Beaton. If they are drawn into the same section as Steve Beaton, I hope they lose and lose big time. But then you look at the players who didn't play poorly this year, but just didn't win enough money. Steve Lennon, 48th in averages. Andy Bottens, 56th. Made some good runs at the back end to almost get in, but left it too late in the end for the former WDF number one. Keen Barry, 60th in averages. DeSousa, 63rd. Graham Hall, 66th. So there's some players who are playing well. It'd be nice to see one of them get some reward for playing well enough over the course of the year. There's always a few people like that. I think Steve Lennon's been in that position before where he's played at a higher level than his results have turned out. So, maybe I'd like to see one of those players who played it well enough. And then I also have to say the first player out on the order of merit. I have his shirt. I stole his nickname. I can't begrudge him qualifying for the World Championships. He had been there or thereabouts all year, but I'm going to go for Robert Owen as the last one I'd like to see qualify, because, I stole his nickname. It would only be fair if he can steal a spot in the World Championships. Anything else for this week?
Well, I've got to say a few thank yous. Thank you to our guests for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner, Condor Darts and Kwiff, for their support. All the links in the description. Go and check them out. Darts Corner in particular, if you've started your Christmas shopping, their Black Friday sale started yesterday. When you're listening to this, they've got lots of deals coming out each day over the next week or so. Definitely worth checking them out. And if you fancy a flutter on the darts this weekend, Kwiff is the place to go. There's a chance to supercharge your odds with Kwiff. Our weekly Dartscast Parlay with Kwiff, 16-1 if you fancy backing that with our predictions that we've gone for the first round. And remember, 18 plus, T's and C's apply. Please gamble responsibly. BeGambleAware.org. And lastly, thank you to everyone for listening. We'll be back next week to recap Minehead, the Players' Championship finals. The draw will be out for the PDC World Championships as well, so we'll be talking about that. Lakeside will just be a few days away, and there's going to be some exciting news from us about that event as well coming soon. So watch this space. Until then, only one thing to do, and that is to enjoy the darts.
Oh, the World Championships is coming up?
Yeah, some small event in London. I don't know if you've been before as a guest of some promoter.
If I had, I'm sure I didn't invite anyone of importance to go with me. As you said there, Alex, a lot to look forward to. We'll try to bring you as many episodes as time allows us to in the lead up to the World Championships, as well as obviously around Lakeside. And we'll also try to get a couple episodes during the tournament itself. So I won't say anything more for now. We've had a lot to talk about, and we'll have a lot more to talk about. So I'm going to conserve a little bit of my voice so that I can, in the future, talk about everything we need to talk about. Until then, hang tight.